Hi, hello, good morning. This is a video that I am doing because I managed to find some polymer clay in my craft box. Now, I have never used polymer clay before. This is the first time that I've ever used it. Now, I've used air drying clay in the past, I've done mud rocking, decoupage, I've used paper, I've used a lot of mixed media in the past. Now, what I am trying to create is a tree by using floristry wire, which is what this is here, as my armature. So the wire is quite thin, so I could probably have done with using a stronger wire, but I like this sort of thickness because it's quite flexible and maneuverable to use. It's very sharp, so please be careful when using it, but it can be easily broken. If I just quickly show you, so it just basically, I mean, you would use snippers to do this, but just by sort of bending it back and forth a few times, okay, it hasn't worked, but I have known it to break in the past just with a little bit of perseverance and bending it back and forth. So it's good in a way that it hasn't sort of broken whilst I've been using it to make one of my trees. Now, with this tree, it's white polymer clay I've used. I have literally gone into this without any research. I'm only researching it now because apparently I have to bake this and I want to make sure I bake it correctly. And yes, I have used clay before. Like I said, I've used air dry clay, and then obviously I've just used normal clay like you would if you were at school or when I was at college. And I know that a few things about clay is like with air drying clay, it will dry out quite quickly. Just using the heat from your hands can do that. One of the things you want to make sure as well is that you avoid air bubbles. And what I probably should have done with this clay first is I should have rolled it out, but I didn't. What I did was I just literally picked up the block of clay. If anyone's ever used fimo before, they'll be aware of that. You're probably shouting at me now going, no, you shouldn't have done that. You should have made sure that you played with it a little bit to make it more malleable. But what I literally did was just literally pick the clay up and then just started applying it to the wire. Now, with this tree that I've made, there is actually 20 pieces of wire in the actual, what I would call the tree trunk. And then all of the 20 pieces of wire are to make the branches. And all I literally did was just try and cover the wire, which was quite difficult and challenging to do because the wire is still actually moving around inside. So I'm hoping that when this is baked, which is apparently what I'm supposed to do is bake it, that the wire, if I just pull that bit off, I didn't want to, but it was falling off anyway. So if I just open it up a little bit at the bottom. So yeah, you can see how freestanding, how the wire is inside. So what I'm obviously hoping to do, because this is starting to crumble now, which means it probably it was too dry to begin with. Yeah, it's definitely breaking. Right, so let me see if I can put all this back together. Just by warming it up through my fingertips. So basically, like I said, I've never used this clay before. This is the first time. And sometimes, if in doubt, try again. So I watched this lady online, and I've shared her onto my YouTube channel. And basically what she was saying is you're supposed to play with your clay, warm it up, roll it out, etc. So originally I was hoping for the whole tree to be white, but for some reason I don't seem to have enough clay to do that. So I need to see what other fimo clay I may have lying around and then try it as well. But yeah, I'm not really happy with this product. And like I said, it's not usually a product I would use. it's just that because obviously I found it in my box of art stuff, I've decided to use it. And one of the things that obviously you can do with any sort of art material that you use, they always say, you can get these brushes when you're working with clay. Make sure you buy like all of the sponges and the molding, the utensils and tools that will help you to mold your clay. But I always say that the best tool that you have is your hands. So wherever possible, try to use your hands. I mean, one of the things I love doing with my little boy, because obviously he's got what is called sensory processing disorder. So he doesn't like the texture and the touch of certain things. So what I always try and do with him is have what I call like an art and craft session, at least once a week, just to kind of get him used to like using and working on his manual dexterity, which again is something that's very important that people need to continue to do throughout their lives, which is why I suppose so many elderly people take up things like crocheting and knitting. So anything where you're constantly using your hands to do stuff is just like, if you don't use it, you lose it sort of thing. And so with him, I'm constantly like trying out different techniques and different ways for him to like sort of manually use his hands to create stuff or feel the texture of fabric or food. I think one of the common mistakes that we were kind of taught about was when I used to do my childcare course, was when you are obviously trying to teach a child about eating and different foods they can eat, is don't give them just a peeled banana. Let them peel the banana. Otherwise, they're not going to get used to what a banana really feels like. All they're going to see is the mushy insides of the banana and not like the actual skin. And the same like with apples or anything basically, or oranges. Don't peel the orange for your child. That doesn't mean you shouldn't supervise your child. It just means let them be aware that, oranges come in a skin. It's a bit like when people ask children, where does milk come from? And they go, Asda. Or, where does apples come from? And they go, Sainsbury's. Or you say, where does chickens come from? And they go, Tesco's. So again, they aren't really taught how food is processed and, what it used to be beforehand. I mean, my son is 10 and he's practically vegan. He doesn't like eating meat. He doesn't like eating fish. He says it's cruel to kill animals to eat them, and he's 10. But that's his decision. That doesn't mean that as a parent that we don't try and encourage him to basically consume the necessary nutrition and and try and encourage him to change his views on his dietary requirements, because at the end of the day, he is still growing. And, if he wanted to be a vegan and he was 30 years old, I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But to be a vegan at the age of 10, which although people might think is very like admirable, there are a lot of health issues relating to obviously restricting your diet from such a young age. That doesn't mean that obviously I just want him to, eat certain foods all the time. But as people will be aware, your body does need a certain amount of, protein and a certain amount of, fat. And obviously your omega-3s. And I'm not saying you can't get that from alternative foods. But again, it's making sure that my 10-year-old actually eats those foods. So like I've said to him is, okay, if you don't want to drink milk anymore from a cow, we can consider goat's milk or oat milk or almond milk or soya milk. But, but at the same time, you've still got to have so much calcium in your diet, so much protein, so much fat. And if you're not going to eat fish, then you need to consider eating things like linseed oil. or, linseed or flax, which is more of a plant-based way, or soya beans is another one to get protein into the body. But he won't eat those either. So, yeah, it's a bit of a battle, but, we're getting there. And I think, like with anything, at some point, you've got to be responsible for your own life choices, so to speak. But he's only 10, so I want to respect his wishes, but at the same time, make sure he stays healthy. So anyway, getting back to using polymer clay, which is one of the ways I try to encourage my children to stay healthy by, improving their manual dexterity, so to speak, and to try different art techniques. Now, all of my children, they love art, and they all have their own sort of hobbies and interest when it comes to art. So one of my children, he's more like photography, digital art, computer-aided design is one of the things that he's really interested in. Another one of my children, he loves drawing, colouring in, that sort of thing. And then obviously my third child, he's very kind of like hands-on. And I keep noticing that as I'm doing this, you can probably hear me, but you can't actually see what I'm doing. So I can only apologise for that. I'm just finding this really, really challenging to use because obviously like I said, I haven't secured any of the, the floristry wire inside the trunk of the tree. So as I'm trying to mould this and sculpt it on, it just keeps moving, which, thinking about it, maybe I should have used something to secure it a little bit better. But, you live and you learn, and this is my first attempt, so I'm just going to kind of go with it and see what happens, really, to be honest. So hopefully I have done this correctly. But I don't know, because all I was really doing was just getting the wire and then getting little pieces of clay and then sort of moulding them with my fingers onto the wire. Whether that's the right way to do this, I really don't know. Like I said, I have never, ever used polymer clay before, and this is my first time. And I've been researching on social media as to the best way to bake it. And apparently there's loads of things that can go horribly wrong when baking. So I think before I even consider baking this, I'm going to do a little bit more research. So this is like the first sort of stage of making my polymer tree with wire inside. And at the moment, that is all of my clay used. Now, if I'd probably prepped this better, which I didn't do, it probably would have gone a little bit further. But at the same time, I love making trees. And when you obviously look at nature, yes, there is a certain amount of like perfection in nature and the way things are. But the one thing I love about trees is how they're always so different and how they always kind of tell a story, of the life they've led and how old they are and, and how they're not always perfect. and, which kind of makes them very individual and in somewhat giving them a very human sort of a feel. Now, this is another tree that I have made. Now, this one's obviously a very different tree in its entirety. This is a jewel tree, as I call it. And with this one, again, I've used the same wire, which is the floristry wire, which is this wire here. And then what I've done is I've obviously twisted the stem. And what I've used, again, is what you can buy from florists. It's amazing because you can get so many different colours. And so all of the stems of these trees I've made, I've not used the same colour for them or the same base. And again, I've allowed my children to do these as well, so not just me. So I've basically just thrown into a pan or a plastic tub loads and loads of different beads. And then I've just said, okay, design your own tree. And this is kind of what we've come up with. And again, we looked at the branches. We looked at how, should there be little bits sticking out? Like with this one, do we want them just to be like a straight branch or a spur off another branch? And then again, a thing that they've had to work out is how to make the tree stand up, which, as you can see, if I was to put that on my hand, it's still too top heavy. But everything that we've used to make these trees, with the exception of obviously buying the wire and the decoupage and varnish glue that I use, and obviously the it's supposed to be self-adhesive, but I've still had to put glue over it just to stop it from unwrapping, that like the florists use to hide the wire. This base is actually a milk bottle top. So we were using different things around the house that could be reduced, reused, recycled by the children to make trees. And then, how heavy will the base need to be to obviously counteract the fact that obviously this tree is quite tall, very top heavy. A lot of the beads at the top are quite big. And so at the moment they are aware that this base needs to be a little bit bigger. So it's something we will build upon. But again, it's just trial and error. And one of the things I really, really love is when artists have the ability to design amazing pieces of artwork, which actually kind of, in a way, defy gravity. And when you think about how they've had to sort of figure out how to make something so that it literally looks like it is suspended, but the center of gravity, a bit like a bridge. People always forget that the main arch stone in a bridge at the top is bigger than all of the rest. And again, that is to make sure that the bridge stays up. So a lot of engineering, a lot of maths, a lot of science and understanding gravity and I'm not very good at explaining the right scientific words, comes into when you're obviously making a piece of artwork as well. So now obviously I have used a fimo clay, fimo polymer clay. And the one thing that's going to come into completing this piece of sculptural art is knowing how to cook it properly. So the same when you work with clay or when you work with glass, it's all to do with the temperature and timing of making sure that this piece, when it is baked, doesn't break, doesn't crack, doesn't explode, doesn't become too brittle or not bake out correctly. So this is something that I'm definitely going to research in a little bit more detail before I kind of bite the bullet in a way and decide to put this in the oven to bake it through. And the other thing obviously I need to do is continue covering and insulating the rest of the wire. And to do that, I will have to find the rest of the fimo / polymer clay that I have used. So I will look for that today, hopefully get this piece finished, and then by the weekend we will have a semi-finished tree. So thank you very much.